Hello, and welcome back to Baby Elias's stories. We now return to Snuff by Terry Pratchett. Part 11. The wind caught the tarpaulin as Vimes pulled it open, and it flapped off across the river, flop, 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 leaving the complicated chicken farmer living in hope and broken eggs. They pulled themselves out into the darkness, their shadows dancing to the rhythm of the lightning. How the hell was the pilot navigating in all this? Lamps up front? Surely they could do nothing on a night like this except show up the darkness. But although there was a suspicion at every bang and bounce that the Fanny was in real trouble, Vimes could hear now the splashing of the paddle wheels like one solid, dependable theme in the cacophony, a regular, reassuring sound. It was making way. There was some order in the world. But how could the pilot manage the chaos? How could you steer when you couldn't see? Feeney had explained in a hurry, and Vimes had expressed utter disbelief even faster. "It's true, sir. He knows every bend in the river. He knows the wind. He knows how fast we're going, and has a stopwatch and an hourglass in reserve. He takes a turn when it's time to take it. Okay, he's shaving the banks a bit with the old Fanny, but she's pretty tough." They jumped together onto the last barge and found a hatch that was locked. However, a crowbar is a universal passkey. And there, under the hatch, were goblins, tied hand and foot, every one, and they had been stacked like cabbages. There were hundreds of them. Overwhelmed, Vimes looked around for Stinky, who turned out to be behind him. "Okay, my friend, over to you. We'll cut them loose, certainly, but I wouldn't mind a bit of reassurance that I won't suddenly have a load of angry goblins twisting my head backward and forward to see which way would take it off. Understand?" Stinky, already as skinny as a skeleton, looked even thinner when he shrugged. He pointed at the groaning heaps. "Too sore, too stiff, too hungry, too." Stinky looked closely at a goblin at the bottom of a pile and touched a flaccid hand. "Too dead to chase anyone, Mr. Policeman? Ha! But later, give food, give water, and they chase. Oh, they chase like the buggery, you bet. Once I talked to them, oh, you bet. But I will say to them, 'Policeman!' Him big arsehole? Okay, but kind arsehole. I will say to them, 'You whack him, I whack you on account that I policeman now. Special policeman Stinky.'" Vimes considered that was the best valedictory he could expect in the circumstances. Just then Feeney managed to lever the lid off a large drum, one of several rolling around on the deck. Immediately the terrible stench in the barge doubled in intensity, and he backed away with his hands over his mouth. Stinky, on the other hand, sniffed approvingly. "Hot damn! Turkey gizzards! Food of the gods! Bastard murder voyage! But okay catering." Vimes stared at him. Well, okay, he thought. He hangs around near humans, so he picks up a vocabulary. Maybe that is suspiciously clever. Perhaps Miss Beadle gave him language lessons, or maybe he's just some occult adventurer from hell knows where, having fun at the expense of a hard-working copper. Not for the first time. Feeney was already cutting ropes, and Vimes tried to resurrect as many goblins as he could in a hurry. It was no errand for anyone with a concern for hygiene, or even a notion of what the word meant. Though after an hour in a storm on old treachery, it had no meaning anyway. They staggered up and fell down again, found their way to the upended barrel of dead turkey bits, and stumbled over slippery decks to a sloshing and now half-empty water trough that Feeney had found and was filling by the simple expedient of sticking a bucket over the side. They were coming back to life. Mostly, they were coming back to life. The barge bounced off a bank again, and amid tumbling goblins, Vimes grabbed for a handhold. Half the entire barge was full of barrels which, if you sniffed anywhere near them, were certainly not full of sweet roses. He braved the rocking deck again and said, "I don't think all this is for a little voyage to the seaside, do you? There's more barrels of stinking turkey entrails than this lot of poor devils could possibly get through in a week." Someone was expecting a long journey. Good grief! The barge had smacked into something, and by the sound of breaking glass, that something had been smashed. Feeney stood up, holding on to a rope, and said, and whipping turkey gizzards off his coat, said, "Voyage, sir, not journey, sir. You wouldn't need all this stuff if you're travelling on land. I reckon they're bound for somewhere a long way away." "Do you think it'll be a holiday of sun, sea, surf and fun?" said Vimes. "No, sir," said Feeney. "And they wouldn't like it if it was, would they? Goblins like the dark." Vimes slapped him on the shoulder. "Okay, Chief Constable Upshot. Don't hit somebody who surrenders, and if a man drops his weapon, be a little bit wary of him until you're certain he hasn't got another one tucked away somewhere, right? If in doubt, knock him out. And you know how to do that. Use the old bang, suck, cling buck on them, eh?" "Yes, sir. That's a recipe for shoe polish, sir, but I'll bear it in mind." Vimes turned to Stinky, who already looked slightly fatter than usual. "Stinky, I don't have the faintest idea what is going to happen next. I can see your chums are starting to look alive, and so you've got the chance that we all get. Sink or swim, and I can't say better than that. Come on, let's go, Feeney." This close, the wonderful Fanny was now a rolling, creaking mess, half covered by flying weeds and sticks. Apart from the storm and the clanging and creaking of the mechanisms, it was silent. "Okay," said Feeney quietly. "We'd better go in by the cattle door at the stern, sir, or as you would say, the back. It won't be a difficult jump. There's lots of handholds because the loadmaster has to come out here to see to the barges. Can you see that double door and the little wicket gate? We go in that way. There'll likely be more cargo along the cattle ramp because a loadmaster never wastes floor space, and then we go midships." "That is to say, the middle of the ship," said Vimes. Feeney smiled. "Yes, sir, and watch out because it's a mass of machinery. You'll see what I mean, because you're smart. Take the wrong step and you could fall into a gear or on top of an ox. Never a happy occasion. It's noisy, smelly and dangerous, so if there are many bandits on this boat, I wouldn't expect to find them there." "I would," Vimes thought. Our Mr. Stratford is the kind of maniac who would want to keep going in suicidal circumstances. Why? So that the cargo is a long way away before anyone knows about it. And Stratford works for Lord Rust, and the Rusts believe the world belongs to them. We're taking goblins somewhere, but they want to keep them alive. Why? The shock of another collision brought him back to the dreadful here and now, and he said, I'd expect to find any crew here being watched like hawks in case they put a spanner in the works. Oh, very smart, sir. Very smart indeed. There has to be some light in there for safety's sake, but not much, and all behind glass, 'cause of... Feeney hesitated, so Vimes suggested. Fire, perhaps? I've never known an engineer who doesn't shove grease wherever he can. Oh, it's not exactly the grease, sir. It's the beasts. The gas does build up, so it does. And if the glass breaks, well, it's regrettably spectacular. 2 years ago, the Glorious Peggy was blown out of the water for just such a reason. Do they eat the hang-suck butt dog with turnips around here? No, sir, not as far as I know. But Bang Bang Duck fusion cookery is very popular on the boats, it's true. Anyway, further on, you'll find the pilot's cabin, the sleeping quarters, and then the wheelhouse, which has very wide windows, which is another good reason to attack from behind. Refreshingly, it was a short leap with a good handhold at the end of it. Vimes had no worries about being heard. The deck creaked under his feet as he crept inside the wonderful Fanny and sidled toward the middle of the ship, or whatever the hell real term for it was. But then she creaked everywhere, and all the time, and groaned too. The boat was so noisy that a sudden patch of silence might have drawn attention to itself. And I'm looking for somebody who looks like everybody else, he thought, right up until he looks like the vicious killer he is. Well, that seems straightforward. Vimes was vaguely aware of huge wheels spinning frantically off to either side and chains travelling overhead. And now, here at the top of the flight of stairs was somebody who clearly wasn't where they should have been. It was a woman, with a small girl clinging to her dress. They had been loosely tied to a creaking beam, and a small oil lamp overhead held them in the center of its circle of light. And this was probably because there was a man sitting a little way away from them on a stool, with a crossbow lying on his lap. And here was a puzzle, because a length of string had been tied to each of his legs. One length of string ran across the floor and disappeared downward into what was, to judge by the heat, the farmyard stink and the occasional bellow of troubled ungulate, the cowshed that Vimes had just passed. Ungulate, having hooves. Ungulate mammals. Ungulate. Ungulate, a hoofed, typically herbivorous quadruped mammal such as a pig, cow, deer, horse, elephant, or rhinoceros, of a group formerly considered a major mammalian taxon, Ungulata. Ungulate. The farmyard stink and the occasional bellow of troubled ungulate, the cowshed that Vimes had just passed. The other string disappeared forward, toward the wheelhouse. The woman spotted him and immediately clasped the child to her chest and very slowly put a finger to her lips. He had to hope that the man hadn't noticed, and did not have to hope that the woman realized that he was there to rescue her, not to add to her troubles. That wasn't necessary. But he did feel better that she was a lady fast on the uptake. He held up a hand in front of Feeney, but the lad was definitely future captain material. He hadn't moved at all. Like Vimes, he had become an observer, and Vimes observed and let the darkness rise up to assess the situation in its own inimitable way. Inimitable, not capable of being imitated, matchless, inimitable. And Vimes observed and let the dark rise up to assess the situation in its own inimitable way. Inimitable way. This wasn't the summoning dark, or at least he fervently hoped not. It was just his own human darkness and internal enemy, which knew his every thought, which knew that every time Commander Vimes dragged some vicious and inventive murderer to such mercy or justice as the law in its erratic wisdom determined, there was another Vimes, a ghost Vimes, whose urge to chop that creature into pieces on the spot had to be chained. This, regrettably, was harder every time, and he wondered if one day that darkness would break out and claim its heritage, and he wouldn't know. The brakes and chains and doors and locks in his head would have vanished, and he wouldn't know. Right now, as he looked at the frightened child, he feared that moment was coming closer. Possibly only the presence of Feeny was holding the darkness at bay. The dreadful urge to do the hangman out of his entitlement of $1 for the drop, 3p for the rope and 6p for his beer. How easy it is to kill, yes, but not when a smart young copper who thinks you are a good guy is looking to you. At home, the Watch and his family surrounded Vimes like a wall. Here, the good guy was the good guy because he didn't want anyone to see him being bad. He did not want to be ashamed. He did not want to be the darkness. The bow was pointed at the two hostages, and its holder had surely been told to fire if a leg pull sounded the alarm. Would he do it? You needed to age a bit for the dark to start trickling in, although there were always one or two who were born as darkness on legs, who would kill for a pastime. Was he one? Even if he wasn't, would he panic? How light was the trigger? Could a sudden jerk set it off? Outside, the storm raged. Whether the water was going down or not didn't seem all that important, given there was so much of the damn stuff around already. The woman was watching him out of the corner of her eye. Oh well, every moment counted. Timing his steps carefully, as if a footstep would be heard in all the thunder and creaking, Vimes crept up to the unsuspecting guard, clamped both hands around his neck and jerked upward. The arrow thudded into the ceiling. I don't want anybody to get hurt. Vimes tried to say it in a friendly way, but went on. If you think you can pull strings, kid, then let me tell you that you'll run out of gasp before I run out of squeeze. Chief Constable Upshot, grab that weapon and tie up this gentleman's legs. You may keep his weapon. I know you like them. He must have inadvertently decreased the pressure, for his captive said hoarsely, I don't want to kill anybody, sir. Please. They gave me the bow and told me I was to fire if the boat stopped or I got a pull on the ropes. Do you think I'd do that, sir? Do you really think I'd do that? I was only sitting here in case one of them came in. Please, sir, I never came along for anything like this. It's Stratford, sir. He's a total nut job, sir. A bloody killer he is. There was a crash and the whole boat shook. Maybe the pilot's stopwatch had let him down. What's your name, mister? Eddie, sir. Eddie Brassbound. I'm just a water rat, sir. The man was trembling. Vimes could see his hand shaking. He turned to the woman with the child, who was being supported now by Feeny, touched his forelock, and flashed his carefully secreted badge. Touched his forelock and flashed his carefully secreted badge. "Madam, I'm Commander Vimes of the Ankh-Morpork City Watch. Has this man mishandled you or the little girl in any way?" The woman had barely moved. She reminded him of the younger Sybil, calm and collected and much more likely to fight than scream, but she wouldn't fight until she was ready. "It was done pretty slick, Commander, just when I was putting Grace to bed. The bastards came on as owners of some cargo and acted like decent boys until my husband said he reckoned the weather was going to get really bad. I was in the galley. I heard a lot of yelling and then we were put down here. Personally, sir, I would deem it a favour if you killed every man jack of them. But life can't be all fun. As far as this one is concerned, well, he could have been less gentlemanly. So although I'd like you to throw him into the river, I wouldn't object if you refused to tie a heavy weight to his leg." Feeney laughed. "Wouldn't need weights, ma'am. The river is having a party and we're all guests. I'm a pretty good swimmer and I wouldn't dare jump into what's out there." Vimes grabbed Brassbound and stared into his eyes. After a moment he said, "No, I know a killer's eyes when I see them. That doesn't mean you ain't a pirate though. So we're going to keep an eye on you, okay? So don't try anything. I'm trusting you. Heavens help you if I'm wrong." Brassbound opened his mouth to speak, but Vimes added quickly, "You can make your life a little easier and possibly longer, Mr. Brassbound, if you were to tell me how many of your jolly parcel of rogues there are on the Fanny." "Don't know, sir. Don't know who's still alive, see?" Vimes looked at the woman as the boat gave a lurch. It was a strange sensation. For a moment Vimes felt almost weightless, and there was a commotion behind them in the cowshed among the great spinning wheels. When he got his balance, he managed to say, "I take it that you are Mrs. Sillytoe, madam?" She nodded. "Yes, I am, Commander," she said as the little girl clung more tightly to her. "I know my husband is still alive because so are we at the moment." She stopped as another surge lifted the entire boat. Then the Fanny came down with a splash and a spine-numbing thump, followed by the long drawn-out bellow of a bullock who had had enough, and the start of a scream. Vimes, Feeney, and Brassbound picked themselves up off the floor. Mrs. Sillytoe and her daughter were, amazingly, still vertical, and Mrs. Sillytoe wore a grim smile. "That sound you heard was one of the pirates dying. I'm extremely pleased to say. That means everyone else in the cowshed is alive. Shall I tell you why? He almost certainly didn't hop. Those lifts and drops are little slams to me. Somewhere behind us, a dam slam is getting so big that bits of it are calving off and coming down all the way to us at a speed, you see, raising the water level and dropping it again like a stone as they go past. And that's when you have to know enough to dance to the rhythm, because if you don't dance to the rhythm of the slam, you'll dance with the devil soon enough." A man went down there with a crossbow when the fighting started, but the sound of it, he wasn't familiar with the dance. I expect it was 10-gallon Charlie who got him when he was on the ground. Poor lamb. Charlie is the bullock wrangler. If he hits a man once, no one will ever have to hit him again. Mrs. Sillytoe said that in a matter-of-fact, satisfied voice. If you want to try to steal from our riverboat, you have to be prepared for some considerable inconveniences." "And I thought the city was on the tough side," Vimes thought. He noticed that a prudent Feeney had rearmed the confiscated crossbow and said, "I'm going below to make certain, Mrs. Sillytoe." "How many other pirates do you think there are?" "There were 4 that came aboard as owners of the cargo." She began to tick them off on her fingers. "Mr. Harrison, the load master, got one of them, but another one stabbed him, the devil. I know only one of them went down to the cowshed, and another one helped this simpering little bastard rig up the rope so that if anybody was left to try any funny business, we were hostage. And then that other man went up to the wheelhouse. I was told that we would be all right, provided my husband gets the cargo to Quirm. The little girl clung to her dress as the woman continued, her face wooden. Personally, I don't believe it, but he hasn't harmed my husband yet. He's counting, all the time he's counting. My husband is listening to old treachery and remembering, trying to outthink 60 miles of murderous water. And if he dies, it wins, wherever you are.
Feeny, keep your crossbow pointing at this gentleman, will you? Said Vimes. And if he makes any movement whatsoever, up to and including trying to blow his nose, you have my full authority to shoot him somewhere where it will be seriously inconvenient.
Vimes headed to the steps and nodded to Feeny and Mrs. Sillytoe, raised a finger and said,
"Be with you in just 1 minute,"
and hurried down into the hot and noisome heart of the wonderful Fanny. Snooker, Vimes thought, knocking the balls until you have the right one right on cue. He felt pressure on his feet surge as the vessel lifted and instantly jumped into the air, landing neatly as the Fanny slapped back down into the water. He was confronted by a man who would surely make even Willikins think twice.
"You'd be 10 gallons. Mrs. Sillytoe sent me down here. I'm Commander Vimes, Ankh-Morpork City Watch."
And the man with a face like a troll and a body to match said,
"Heard about you. Thought you were dead."
"I generally look like this at the end of boat trips, Mr. Gallons," said Vimes. Then pointing to an apparent corpse on the floor between them,
"What happened to him?" "I think he is dead,"
10 Gallons leered.
"I've never seen a man suffocated by his own nose before."
It was hard to hear anything down in the cowshed given the complaining of the oxen and the ominous whirring of overstressed gears, but Vimes shouted,
"Did he have a crossbow?"
10 Gallons nodded, and fingers thicker than Vimes's wrist unhooked said weapon off a nail on the wall.
"Would come with you, mister, but it's all the 3 of us can do to hold things together down here."
He spat.
"Ain't really any hope anyway. The damn slam is right behind us. See you on the other side, copper."
Vimes nodded at him, examined the crossbow for a moment, made a little adjustment and, satisfied, climbed up the steps. Vimes looked at the few people left on the wonderful Fanny, who weren't pouring water on the backs of steaming oxen or trying to hold the boat in one piece and above water. The shocks were indeed getting closer together. He was sure of it, and surely, once there was a big enough hole, the whole damn dam would give way. All the occupants of the cabin, except Brassbound, who fell over, jumped together as yet another surge raised the boat. There was a sharp intake of breath from Feeny as Vimes went over to the trembling Brassbound, who had clearly realized that he was unlikely to be the unlucky winner of the first over-the-side contest. And Feeny actually groaned when Vimes handed the man the recovered crossbow, saying, "I told you, Chief Constable, I know a killer when I see one, and I need backup, and I'm sure that our Mr. Brassbound is very eager to get himself promptly onto the good side of the law right now. A decision that might well make him look better in court. Am I not right, Mr. Brassbound?" The young man nodded fervently. Vimes added,
I'd rather have you down here, Feeney, until I know exactly who is still on this tub. I'd like you to look after the ladies. Right now, I'm not sure I know who's alive and who's dead.
The Fanny is not a tub, Commander, said Mrs. Sillytoe sharply. But I'll forgive you this one time. Vimes gave her a little salute as all but Brassbound jumped, and once again the idiot floundered. Vimes turned toward the stairs.
It's going to be Stratford up there with the pilot, isn't it, Mr. Brassbound?
Another bigger surge this time, and Brassbound landed heavily. He managed to get out. And he's heard about you. You know how it is. And he's determined to get down to the sea before you catch up with him. He's a killer, sir. A stone killer. Don't give him a chance, sir. I beg you, for all our sakes, and do it quickly for yours. The air was electric, truly electric. Everything metal shook and jangled. They say the dam is going to break pretty soon, said Brassbound.
Thank you for that, Mr. Brassbound. You sound like a sensible young man to me, and I'll say so to the authorities.
The worried young man's face was wreathed in smiles as he said, And you're the famous Commander Vimes, sir. I'm glad to be at your back. There were a lot of steps up to the wheelhouse. The pilot was king and rode high over the river, monarch of all he surveyed, even if, as now, rain hammered at the expensive glass windows as if it found such solid slabs of sky offensive. Vimes stepped inside quickly. It was hardly worth shouting, given that the storm drowned out everything. But you had to be able to say that you'd said it. Commander Vimes, Ankh-Morpork City Watch. Statute of necessary action, which didn't exist, but he swore to himself that he would damn well get it enacted as soon as he got back, even if he had to call in favors from all over the world. A lawman faced with a dreadful emergency should at least have some kind of fig leaf to shove down the throats of the lawyers. He could see the back of Mr. Sillytoe's head with his pilot's cap. The pilot paid Vimes no attention, but a young man was standing looking at Vimes in knock-kneed, pants-wetting horror. The sword he had been carrying landed heavily on the deck. Brassbound was hopping from one foot to the other. You'd better take care of him right now, Commander. He'll have a trick or two up his sleeve, and no mistake. Vimes ignored this and carefully patted the young man down, freeing up one short knife, the sort a river rat might carry. He used it to cut a length of rope and tied the man's hands together behind him.
Okay, Mr. Stratford, we're going downstairs, though if you'd like to dive in the water first, I won't stop you.
And then the man spoke for the first time.
I ain't Stratford, sir, he said, pleading. I'm Squeezy McIntyre. That's Stratford behind you with the crossbow pointing at you, sir.
The man, formerly known as Brassbound, gave a chuckle as Vimes turned.
Oh my, the great Commander Vimes. I'll be damned if you ain't as dumb as a pile of horse shit. You know the eyes of a killer when you see them, do you? Well, I reckon I've killed maybe 16 people, not including goblins, of course. They don't count.
Stratford sighted on Vimes and grinned.
Maybe it's my boyish features, would you say? What kind of bloody fool cares about the goblins, eh? Oh, they say they can talk, but you know how those little buggers can lie?
The tip of the crossbow drifted back and forward hypnotically in Stratford's hands.
I'm curious, though. I mean, I don't like you, and sure as salvation, I'm going to shoot you. But do me a favour and tell me what you saw in my eyes, okay? Squeezy took the opportunity to hop desperately down the steps, just as Vimes said with a shrug. I saw a goblin girl be murdered. What lies did she tell you? I know the eyes of a murderer, Mr. Stratford. Oh, I surely do, because I've looked into eyes like that many times. And if I need reminding, I look into my shaving mirror. Oh yes, I recognise your eyes, and I'm interested to see what you're going to do next, Mr. Stratford. Though now I come to think about it, maybe it wasn't sensible of me to give you that crossbow. Maybe I really am stupid, because I'm offering you the opportunity to surrender to me here and now, and I'm doing it only once. Stratford stared with his mouth open and then said, Hell, Commander! I've got the drop on you, and you want me to surrender to you? Sorry, Commander, but I'll see you again in hell. There was a space in the world for the crossbow to sing when the grinning Stratford pulled the trigger. Click! Fortunately, the sound that it made approximated to the word thunk. He stared at it. I took the safety pin out and stamped it into the dung, said Vimes. You can't fire it without the pin. Now I expect you have a couple of knives about your person, so if you fancy cutting your way out past me, then I'd be happy to accommodate you. Although I'll tell you that firstly, you won't succeed, and secondly, if you manage to get past the boy who grew up on the streets of Ankh-Morpork, there's a man down there with a punch that can fell an elephant, and if you knife him, you'll just make him more annoyed. The surge this time was bigger than ever, and Vimes banged his head on the cabin's roof before coming down again in front of Stratford and kicking him smartly in the official police officer method, and also the groin. Oh, come on, Mr. Stratford. Don't you have a reputation to keep up? Feared killer. You should spend some time in this city, my lad, and I'll make certain you do. Stratford fell backward and Vimes continued. And then you'll hang, as is right and proper. But don't worry, Mr. Trooper does a nifty noose, and they say it hardly hurts at all. Tell you what, just to get the adrenaline pumping, Mr. Stratford, imagine I'm the goblin girl. She begged for her life, Mr. Stratford. Remember that? I do, and so do you. You fell down at the first surge, Mr. Stratford. River rats know what to do. You didn't, although I must say you've covered it very well. Whoops! This was because Stratford had indeed tried his hand with a knife. Vimes twisted his wrist and flung the blade down the stairs just as the glass in the wheelhouse smashed, and a branch longer than Vimes ploughed across the room, shedding leaves and dragging torrential rain and darkness behind it. Both the lamps had gone out, and, as it turned out, so had Stratford, hopefully through a shattered window, possibly to his death, but Vimes wasn't sure. He would have preferred, definitely. But there was no time to fret about him, because now came another surge, and water poured in through the glassless windows. Vimes jerked open the little gate to the pilot's deck and found Mr. Sillytoe struggling up out of the pile of storm-washed debris. He was moaning, I've lost count! I've lost count! Vimes pulled him upward and helped him into his big chair, where he banged on the arms in frustration. And now I can't say a damn thing in all this murk! Can't count, can't see, can't steer, won't survive! I can see, Mr. Sillytoe, said Vimes. What do you want me to do? You can? Vimes stared out at the homicidal river. There's a thundering great rock coming up on the left-hand side. Should it be doing that? Looks like there's a busted landing stage there. Ye gods! That's Baker's Knob! Here, let me at the wheel. How close is it now? maybe 50 yards. And you can see it in all this? Damn me, mister. You must have been born in a cave. That means we ain't that far from Quirm now. A touch under 19 miles. You think you could stand lookout? Is my family okay? That let us not threaten to harm them if I didn't keep the fanny on schedule. Something big and heavy bounced off the roof. Boom! And spun away into the night. And the pilot went on. Gastric Silito! Delighted to make your acquaintance, sir. He stared ahead. I've heard of you. Coombe Valley, right? Happy to have you aboard. Gastric? Whole tree spinning and current near left-hand shore, 10 yards ahead. Nothing much to see on right. The wheel spun frantically again. Obliged to you, sir, and I surely hope you won't take it amiss if I say that we generally talk about port and starboard. Wouldn't know about that, Gastric. Never drank starboard. Mass of what looks like smashed logs ahead, 40 yards. Looks like small stuff, and I see a faint light high up on our right. Can't tell how far away. Vimes ducked, and a jagged log bounced off the back of the wheelhouse. Beside him, the pilot sounded as if he had got a grip on things now. Okay, Commander. That would be Jackson's Light. Very welcome sight. Now I've found my bearings and an hourglass that ain't busted. I'd be further in your debt if you could go below and tell 10 gallons to cut loose the barges. There's a chicken farmer on one of them. Best to get him on board before the dam breaks. And hundreds of goblins, Gastric. Pay them no mind, sir. Goblins is just goblins. For a moment, Vimes stared into the darkness, and the darkness within the darkness, and it said to him, You're having fun, aren't you, Commander? This is Sam Vimes being Sam Vimes in the dark and the rain and the danger. And because you're a copper, you're not going to believe that Stratford is dead until you see the corpse. You know it. Some people take a devil of a lot of killing. You know you saw him go out of the cabin. But there's all kinds of ropes and handholds on the boat, and the bugger was wiry and limber. And you know, just as day follows night, that he'll be back. Double jeopardy, Commander Vimes. All the pieces on the board. Goblins to save, a murderer to catch, and all the time, when you remember, there is a wife and a little boy waiting for you to come back. I always remember. Of course you do, Commander Vimes, the voice continued. Of course you do. But I know you, and sometimes a shadow passes every sun. Nevertheless, the darkness will always be yours, my tenacious friend. And then reality either came back or went away, and Vimes was saying, We bring the goblins aboard, Gastric, because they are evidence in an important police investigation. There was a further surge, and this time Vimes landed up on the deck, which was a little bit softer now because of the ragged carpet of leaves and branches. As he got up, Mr. Silito said, Police investigation, you say? Well, the Fanny has always been a friend of the law, but, well, sir, they stink like the pits of hell, and that's the truth of it. They'll frighten the oxen something terrible. Do you think they aren't frightened already? Said Vimes. Small log jam, ahead on the right, all clear on the left. Vimes sniffed. Trust me, sir. By the smell of it, they're pretty nervous as it is. Can't you just stop and tie us up to the bank? Silito's laugh was brittle. Sir, there are no banks now, none that I'd try to get to. I know this river, and it's angry, and there's a damn slam coming. Can't stop it any more than I could stop the storm. You signed up for the long haul, Commander. Either we race the river, or we fold our hands, pray to the gods, and die right now. He saluted. Nevertheless, I can see you're a man, sir, who does what he sees needs doing. And by hokey, I can't argue with that. You've done a man's job as it is, Commander Vimes, and may the gods go with you. May they go with all of us.
Vimes ran down the steps and grabbed Feeney in passing as he danced over the heaving floor to the cowshed. Come on, lad. It's time to ditch the barges. There's too much of a drag. Mr. 10 Gallons, let's get those doors open, shall we? Mr. Sillytoe has put me in charge down here. If you want to argue, feel free. The huge man didn't even attempt an argument and punched the doors open. Boom! Vimes swore. Mr. Sillytoe had been right. There was roaring not far behind them, and a river of lightning and blue fire was sweeping down the valley like a tide. For a moment he was hypnotized, and then got a grip. Okay, Feeney, you start getting the goblins on board, and I'll fetch our chicken farmer. The bloody iron ore can sink for all I care. In the glaring light of the dam slam, Vimes jumped twice to land on the barge, from which was already coming the squawking of terrified birds. Water poured over him. Water poured off him as he dragged open the hatch and shouted, Mr. False! No, don't start grabbing the chickens. Better off farmer with no chickens than a load of chickens with no farmer. Anyway, they'll probably float or fly or something. He coaxed the frightened man onto the next barge to find that it was still full of bewildered goblins. Feeney was looking out from the open door at the rear of the fanny, and above the roar and hissing, Vimes heard him shout, It's Mr. 10 Gallons, sir. He says no goblins. Vimes glanced behind them and then turned back to Feeney. Very well, Mr. Feeney. Keep an eye on the goblins' barge while I discuss matters with Mr. 10 Gallons. Understand? He flung Mr. False onto the deck of the fanny and looked around for 10 Gallons. He shook his head. What a copper that man would make if properly led by human beings. He sighed. Mr. 10 Gallons, I told you, Mr. Sillytoe has given me carte blanche. Can we discuss the matter of the goblins? The giant growled. I ain't got no cart, and I don't know no blanche, and I ain't having no goblins on my deck, okay? Carte blanche. Full discretionary power. See discretion. Power of free decision or latitude of choice within certain legal bounds. Discretion. Carte blanche. Mr. 10 Gallons, I told you Mr. Sillytoe has given me carte blanche. Can we discuss the matter of the goblins? The giant growled. I ain't got no cart, and I don't know no blanche, and I ain't having no goblins on my deck, okay? Vimes nodded, poker-faced, and looked exhaustedly at the deck. Is that your last word, Mr. 10 Gallons? It damn well is. Okay, this is mine. 10 Gallons went over backward like a tree and began to sleep like a log. The street never leaves you. And what the University of the Street told you was that fighting was a science. The science of getting the opponent out of your face and face down on the ground with the maximum amount of speed and the minimum of effort. After that, of course, you had a range of delightful possibilities and the leisure in which to consider them. But if you wanted to fight fair, or at least more fair than most of the other street options, then you had to know how to punch and what to punch, and from precisely which angle to punch it. Of course, his treasured brass knuckles were an optional but helpful extra, but Vimes thought as he tried to wring some blood back into his fingers, probably any court, after sight of 10 Gallons,
would have forgiven Vimes, even if he used a sledgehammer. He looked at the brass knuckles. They hadn't even bent. Good old Ankh-Morpork know-how. The country may have the muscle, but the city has got the technology, he thought, as he slipped them back in his pocket. Okay, Mr. Feeney, let's get them in, shall we? Find Stinky. He's the brains of the outfit. Possibly Stinky was the brains of the outfit. Even at the end, Vimes was never certain just what Stinky was, but the goblins, spurred by his crunchy chattering, ran and leapt like ugly gazelles past Vimes and into the boat. He took one look at the growling death behind them, made the last jump into the boat, and helped Feeney shut and bolt the doors. And that meant that now, with the ventilation gone, the bulls in the basement were getting nostrils full of goblin. It wasn't, Vimes thought, all that bad when you got used to it. More alchemical than midden, but down below there was a lot of shouting and a jerk as the beasts tried to stampede inside their treadmill. Vimes ignored it, despite the shuddering of the boat, and shouted, "Let go of the barges, Chief Constable!" "I hope you really do know how!" Feeney nodded and opened the hatch in the floor. Spray blew in and stopped when he knelt down and stuck his hand into the hole. "Takes quite a few turns before they drop, Commander. If I was you, I'd be holding on to something when the iron ore goes." Vimes elbowed his way through the terrified goblins, pulled himself with care up into the wheelhouse again, and tapped Gastric on the shoulder. "We're dropping the barges any minute!" The pilot, still clinging to the wheel and squinting into the dark, gave a brief nod. Nothing less than a scream would be heard in the wheelhouse now. The wind and debris had smashed every window. Vimes looked out of the rear window and saw the great, floating, flying desolation of lightning-laced wood, mud, and tumbling rock closing in. For a moment he thought he saw a naked marble lady tumbling with the debris and clutching her marble shift as if defending the remains of her modesty from the deluge. He blinked and she was gone. Perhaps he'd imagined it. He shouted, "I hope you can swim, sir!" Just as the dam slam caught up and the apparition called Stratford dived through the window and was fielded neatly by Vimes, to Stratford's great surprise. "Do you think I'm a baby, Mr. Stratford? Do you think that I don't think?" Stratford squirmed out of Vimes's grip, spun neatly, and threw a punch which Vimes very nearly dodged. It was harder than he had expected, and to give a devil his due, Stratford knew how to defend, and, perish the thought, was younger than Vimes, much younger. Yes, you could tell the eyes of a murderer, at least after they had done more than 3 or so, and got away with it. Their eyes held the expression some gods probably had, but a killer in the process of trying to kill was always absorbed, constantly calculating, drawing upon some hideous strength. If you cut their legs off, they wouldn't notice until they fell off. Tricks didn't work, and the floor was slippery from the debris of half a forest. As they kicked and punched their way back and forth across the wheelhouse deck, Stratford was winning. When had Vimes last eaten? Or had a decent drink of water, or slept properly? And then, from below was the cry, "Barges away!" And the wonderful Fanny bucked like a thoroughbred, throwing both of the fighters to the floor, where Vimes barely had room to kick and fend off blows. Water poured over them, filling the cabin to waist level, reducing Vimes's stamina to almost nothing. Stratford had his hands around his throat, and Vimes's world turned dark blue and full of chuckling water, banging against his ears. He tried to think of young Sam and Sybil, but the water kept washing them away, except that the pressure was suddenly gone, and his body, deciding that his brain had at last gone on holiday, flailed upward. And there was Stratford, kneeling in water that was falling away very fast, a matter probably of no concern to him now, since he was holding his head and screaming, owing to the fact that suddenly there was Stinky, spread-eagled on Stratford's head, reaching down and kicking and scratching anything that could be kicked off, scratched, all to one lengthy scream, pulled. His Grace the Duke of Ankh, assisted by Sir Samuel Vimes with the help of Commander Vimes, got to his feet with the last-minute assistance of Blackboard Monitor Vimes, and all of them coalesced into one man as he leapt across the shaking deck, just too late to stop Stratford pulling Stinky and a certain amount of hair off his head, and throwing him to the streaming deck and stamping on him heavily. There was no mistaking it. He'd heard the crack of bones even while airborne, and so what hit Stratford was the full force of the law and its rage. The street is old and cunning, but the street is always willing to learn, and that is why Vimes, in mid-air, felt his legs unfold and the full majesty of the law hit Stratford with the traditional, unstoppable, one man he up-down very sorry. Even Vimes was surprised and wondered if he would be able to do it again. "We're on the wave!" Gastric shouted. "We're on it, not under it! We're surfing all the way to Quirm, Commander! There's light ahead, glory be!" Vimes grunted as he wrapped the last of the rope from his pocket around the stunned Stratford, tying him tightly to a stanchion. 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 An upright bar, post, or support, as for a roof or a ship's deck. Stanchion. Vimes grunted as he wrapped the last of the rope from his pocket around the stunned Stratford, tying him tightly to a stanchion. "Sink or swim, you're going to pay, Mr. Stratford. From heaven, hell, or high water. I don't care which." And then there was a creaking and a bellowing as the frantic oxen redoubled their attempts to escape the stench of the goblins immediately behind them, a surge skyward, and while it would be most poetic to say that the waters were on the face of the earth, in truth, they were mostly on the face of Samuel Vimes.